Good to be together again. And often when we're together, we're contemplating one text year and a half, 2 years. The most recent series on the loving kindness meditation was maybe 4 months. So I'm thinking about how we're moving forward and the stages of moving forward, but we're sort of at a little in-between state. And it, in the sense that I haven't found exactly the right text that fits the next big topic. So I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about heritage, or in our terms, we say lineage, particularly because I was contemplating that in my most recent retreat. So I was focusing on a sadhana from Marpa. And to make a deeper connection with Marpa, one of the books, I think I mentioned last week that you only take a limited number of books, was his biography. And then a very beautiful book, which we dip in occasionally, called The Reign of Wisdom, which has the joyous enlightenment songs of the different, we would say our particular reign of wisdom is the Kagyu Masters, which includes all of the different Kagyu traditions, or the shared Kagyu tradition, which includes Marpa. And I realized also this is my 30th year in the Drikung lineage, or let's say the 30th year of ordination. It's longer in the lineage. So when I think of Marpa, I think of him like a grandparent. I know his story so intimately and have a sense of him, but that doesn't mean that you have that same sense of him and that same trust that comes from practicing the instructions that date back to Marpa, and then seeing how it opens a view or understanding of your mind. And when we're practicing and you're listening to the teachings from commentaries by His Holiness or Garchen Rinpoche, there isn't the same shared sense of, oh yes, this comes from Marpa. The reason we have this is because of Marpa. So I thought it'd be fun to look at some of these lineage people in a way of inviting you to see a little bit more of the heritage of this particular lineage, and connect the dots between what we're studying and how we receive the Dharma that we're studying, particularly from Marpa. So yet again, I head for pictures. Just to give a sense. Okay, so we looked at this once before, but this is a timeline of Buddhism. Oh, something happened. So you can see that Buddha first taught, we think 6,000 BC, but the teachings came to Tibet in first and maybe 200 CE. And then we think of 2 major or 3 major transitions. There was the first king of Tibet who received the 6-syllable mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum. And then much later, around 800, there was Padmasambhava. And our particular lineage, the Kagyu lineage, including the Drikung Kagyu, we date a little after Padmasambhava in 988. And then you see Marpa comes in 10,012. So that just gives you a sense of the timeline and how far back we're going. So even though I'm speaking intimately about Marpa like a grandparent, it was 1,000 years ago. And it's fascinating to me to think of the relationship we have in terms of how treasured the teachings are, and the process of passing the teachings, I've mentioned this before, has to be person to person. All of the empowerments you have to receive personally, even the texts and instructions you receive personally, and then you pass them to somebody else personally. So part of the intimacy of the lineage is seeing how we are directly connected by breath, essentially, back to Marpa. And I'm going to be referring, here's Marpa on the left. He was said to be not the most even-tempered person. So he's not smiling in most of his pictures. And then his main teacher was Naropa, who's on the far right. But two other important teachers were Saraha and Maitripa. So those are the two in the middle, with Saraha being in the top. And then what Marpa is most known for is 3 trips to India. And just to get a sense of his courage, he was born in the middle of Tibet. So you can see this huge range of mountains if he was born in the middle of Tibet, between India and where he was born. And then if you see the size of India, it's so huge. And then on the lower one, I have the size of Tibet. So if we said that Marpa walked from the middle of Tibet to the Bihar area, which is along the Ganges down about, I think you can see where my arrow is, in this area of India, he was walking from, at least Maine to Washington, D.C. So just getting that perspective, I think, adds a relationship to the story of Marpa. So because he was such a bad-tempered little boy, his parents thought, oh, maybe we should give him some Dharma education because it will help him learn how to control his emotions and become more peaceful. And he went to a local teacher and learned language. So Marpa we think of as someone who has the ocean of languages, and we often call him Marpa Lotsawa, means Marpa the translator. But the word translator means eye of the world. So a translator is only as good as their understanding of the Dharma. It's not just the language, but it's the understanding. And this first teacher taught him the key languages, but he didn't have a particular karmic tie. So if you don't have a karmic tie to someone, there isn't the invisible thread of connection that builds a relationship, that feeling that you have a kinship with the person, or there's some door of understanding beneath the intellectual. So he decided to go to Tibet to learn directly from the teachers. And he was a young person on his first trip, and he went to his parents and said, I want you to give me my share of our inheritance now. And his parents were sort of shocked, and his family was shocked, and they tried to talk him out of it. I mean, if you can imagine going to your parents and, whatever you're going to give me, I want you to give it to me now so I can go to India and learn the Dharma. It was a pretty shocking thing to do. And he was resolute, so they did give him his share of inheritance. But what I'm trying to say is it's like an act of courage to say, I know my direction in life. I'm going to use whatever I have access to fulfill this very clear aspiration that I have, and I'm going to risk everything. Whatever my inheritance might be, I'm going to put it on the table. So he had great faith in the Dharma, and he had an unshakable aspiration to bring the vast teachings to Tibet. So in the establishment of Buddhism in Tibet, there were waves where there would be one extraordinary teacher, things would start, but it didn't quite take hold. And this is one of those periods where things had started to go in decline again, and he decided that he was going to take personal responsibility to bring the wealth of teachings to Tibet. So in that era, because of the altitude of Tibet, it was the norm to go to Nepal and spend several years there acclimatizing and then go to even lower altitude in India. So he spent 3 years in Nepal. He didn't have contact with any great teachers, but one day there was a crowd in the market, and there were 2 disciples of Naropa. And in terms of karmic ties, just hearing the name Naropa opened something in him, and he just immediately knew that this was the teacher he needed to find. And these students were pretty dismissive. Most Tibetans didn't know the languages, and they weren't particularly kind to Tibetans in terms of teaching them the languages. So he didn't care. He knew that he needed to find Naropa, so he got general directions of the area of India where Naropa was residing and decided that he would keep walking. And when we think of it, he had to cross mountains that were extremely cold. So he had to endure the cold and then go through jungles in India that were extremely hot and endure the heat. And, it was an era where there were robbers that would kill you, and wild animals and poisonous snakes. So it was tremendously dangerous to travel. But he went to India, and all in all spent 12 years with Naropa. And Naropa recognized his sincerity, and there was this teacher-student relationship that was so respectful. Marpa understood what he was receiving and offered all his wealth to Naropa. Not that Naropa needed it or wanted it, but it was a way of understanding the value, that it was worth everything. So from time to time, he would take a break, and there was a friend from Tibet that he had traveled with part of the way, and so he would go and they would confer, what are you learning? What are you learning? And the other guy would say, but I've learned, all of this area, and I've learned this area of knowledge. And Marpa would go back to Naropa and say, oh, I want to learn this, or I want to learn this. And Naropa would send him to various other teachers. And it's not that Naropa could not teach him these things. It was that Naropa understood the significance of what Marpa was doing in bringing the teachings to Tibet, and wanted him to have the blessing lineage directly from the key people who were holding those lineages. And even some of the struggles that he went through, like Naropa said, I'm going to send you to this person, but he lives on an island in a poisonous lake, and he's a very dangerous person, and he's going to test you. Don't pay attention to anything, just say you're there, that your guru sent you, and you really want to learn, this particular area. So he made it to this poisonous lake and made it across the poisonous lake. And the guy was really scary looking. And Marpa said, I really want these teachings from you. And he said, oh, your guru is a jerk. Your guru doesn't know anything. Who are you? I have no interest in you. He just sort of kept insulting him, saying terrible things to him. And then finally, when Naropa wouldn't leave, he said, oh, okay, I see that you're really sincere, and gave him the particular set of teachings that he was interested in. And I'm saying all these things to give you a sense of why Marpa is so respected. It was the extraordinary courage and effort that he did to bring all of these teachings to Tibet. And it's not that he was just bringing the teachings, he practiced them and accomplished them. And in accomplishing them, then he had the experience to bring back, not just the text and the instructions. So after the 12 years, he thought it was time to return to Tibet. And they had this wonderful celebration. And Naropa, essentially treated him like a son and gave him this very personal advice. Marpa, you should never allow yourself to be dominated by the 8 worldly concerns. You should never let your mind think in terms of subject and object, of I and other. You should never put other people down or criticize them in an aggressive way, but you should always study and reflect as much as you can, because this will act like a lamp to remove all darkness. The study and reflection is the path that leads to liberation. So always maintain your studies. As for your relationship to the guru, so far you have relied very closely on your guru, and you have respected him and served him well as you did before, so you should always do that in the future. Never forget that your mind is like a jewel. It is a jewel because it is the source of having all happiness and all goodness. Know that what I have told you is in your mind, and never forget it. Never leave this knowledge unused. Always use it, always be aware of it. So then he begins the very long journey back to Tibet, and he meets the traveling companion named, a friend from Tibet. His name was Nyo Lotsawa. And the guy was jealous. So they're in the middle of the ocean. Marpa's carrying, all of this pile of texts that he's acquired, all of his notes and, whatever he had. And the other guy capsizes the boat, so it was all lost after 12 years. Fortunately, Marpa had, essentially, he must have had a photographic mind. So he spent many, many years recapturing all of the instructions and all of the texts. So he's traveling back to Tibet, and on the way, he has this incredible dream. And in the dream, he meets Saraha. So I showed you the picture of Saraha. And Saraha had one, or was the originator of one stream of Mahamudra. And his second most important teacher in India, in addition to Naropa, was Maitripa. And Maitripa had another lineage of Mahamudra. So this dream was really, really important because in this dream, he received the second lineage of Mahamudra, which meant he had the complete teachings of hundreds and hundreds of years on Mahamudra. So Saraha was maybe 300 years before Marpa. And he recounted the dream, or the instructions he received in the dream. And when you hear this, they will sound familiar to you because they are the same things that we study now. Emptiness and compassion are inseparable and are unceasing. The continuity of these two is never broken. This is because, from the very beginning, they are within the mind. They have not been created anew. They are part of the very nature, the natural condition of the mind. They are continually there. Where does one find the root of this? It is found in the mind, and that's why one should guard mental consciousness very carefully. When one looks for the essence of the mind, look at the present instant. Don't become involved with the moment before or the moment that will come later. The whole point of meditation is to be within the nature of mind. If one interferes and changes things, that is not meditation. The point of meditation is to let the mind be within the true nature of the mind. It isn't a matter of thinking it is like this or like that. The true way is to meditate, to leave the mind in an unaltered state without changing or interfering anything. So with that dream, he continued back, and he spent a long time making sure he captured everything from his memory, but he was called back to see Naropa 2 more times. And I have such affection because the final time he was called back, at that point he had a large family. He had a son who was, fully grown, 20, 25-year-old son, and so many students, and they were all begging him not to go back. And he was so firm, despite his age, that he would cross all those mountains. They would walk, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles, maybe let's say 1,000 miles, the extreme cold, the extreme heat. And he said, I know the way. I know I'm old, but I know the way. It would be so hard for my son. I know what to look out for. I'll talk more about that another time. We'll do another section of his life. But I just wanted to start to give you a sense of the historic connections we have and how meaningful they are. And part of the vast treasury is the whole Vajrayana system that he received from Naropa. So we have the Mahamudra teachings, we have the vast treasury of the Vajrayana teachings, and they're coming to us from Tibetan teachers. So they're all going back to Marpa and his students, because he made the journey from Tibet to India to gather the teachings. So America is such a new country, and our history is so new. But, we're living in an era where here are these Tibetan teachers in the time of diaspora, and I'm sure they feel extremely connected to Marpa because they, the older guys left their homeland of Tibet. And first they went to India, and then somehow they have crossed continents to these totally different cultures, totally different kinds of minds, sometimes not knowing any of the language at all, but with the same aspiration that because they're suffering beings and because the Dharma can assuage suffering, even if my body is old, even if I have no idea what's going to happen in this strange country, I will find a way to be as courageous and determined as Marpa. So let's just sort of let that sink in. I'm going to go back and read a little bit of that passage again, the key instructions from Saraha that were received in a dream. Emptiness and compassion are inseparable and are unceasing. The continuity of these two is never broken. This is because from the very beginning, they are within the mind. They have not been created anew. They are part of the very nature of the natural condition of the mind. So devotion doesn't magically come out of thin air. Devotion is more seeing how the Dharma affects your life and then having gratitude, incredible gratitude for the key people like Marpa and the key teachers that we are meeting right now. We wouldn't meet them if we didn't have a karmic connection, and we wouldn't keep studying with them if we didn't have a karmic connection. But it's not meant to be or imply love at first sight. It's meant to imply that as we practice, as we value every phrase that opens our mind, we have more and more gratitude and appreciation. And that's what we mean by, when we use the word devotion or devotion to the lineage or devotion to a teacher. It's not about charisma. Many of these people are really charismatic, but not all of them are very charismatic. It's more about gratitude relative to your own practice opening and deepening.